Ladies and gentlemen, welcome again. My name is Valerie, and thank you very much for being a part of You Alive today. The program today is in 3 sections: a 10-minute talk by our speaker, Madam Halimah Yacob, a 20-minute interview with Mr. Viswa Sadasivan, Chairman of the You Alive Organizing Committee, and then a 30-minute Q&A session. If you wish to ask a question, do make your ways to the microphones placed along the aisles and speak directly into them. This is essential so the online community is able to hear your question. Today, we will also be using Pigeonhole Live for our Q&A session. So if you have a smartphone, laptop, or tablet with you, just launch your internet browser and go to phlive.at. Key in our event passcode, which is YouAlive, and then click Go. You're then free to fire away your burning questions while voting up any question that interests you. The more popular questions with more votes will stand a higher chance to be answered by our speaker. Also, do remember to leave your feedback about the event on the Pigeonhole application after the show. Thank you very much for your kind attention, and please enjoy.
Alive.
Ladies and gentlemen, Madam Halimah Yacob.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me here. And of course, when Viswa invited me, he didn't tell me that it's so formal. In fact, the whole getting up was even worse than when you appear in a studio on TV, you know. So it's quite intimidating, but I think we'll all manage. But thank you very much. I'm really very honored and very happy to be here, to be able to share with you some of my experiences. And I'm sure that you will also have a lot of experiences to share with me. And let me start by introducing myself a little bit. I started work in the labor movement in 1978. I spent more than 3 decades of my life in the labor movement before, of course, in 2011, I moved on to government for 1.5 years. And then, beginning of this year, I was asked to take on the speaker's job, nominated, and was elected. Well, in the labor movement, of course, as you know, a lot of our work we do on the ground. We spend a lot of work on the ground, time on the ground, and that is really my forte, actually. So Viswa asked me this question, you know, he said that, tell me why you call the speaker when you can't speak? That's a very good question. I'll look up the history and let him know, because I've had only 11 months to quickly adjust to the job, so really I need some time to look up. But it's a good question, so I'm really glad you gave me a chance to speak today, so I think that's also very important. That's another reason why I accepted, you know. As someone with a very strong trade union background, one of the things trade unionists like to do is we like to talk. But I've only got 10 minutes, so I can't talk too much, so please bear with me, you know. Before, I was told by Mr. Savage here that I will be savaged by Viswa in the next 20 minutes after that. But okay, let's sit back and, you know, share with me some of my experiences. I will talk to you about some of the causes that I worked with very closely, was associated with, during my career in both the labor movement, in politics, and so on. One of the things that we do in labor is, of course, one of my pet projects is a Back to Work program. We started that program in 2007, and it is one of the most fulfilling program that I started in 2007. And it's because many women had to leave the workforce in order to take care of their family. And then for them to get back into the workforce after spending 20 years out of the workforce is really very difficult. So it was really something that I really liked doing. And this is where we started the program. And we had helped thousands of women to go back to work. Although here, it said only 1,250, but it was only for that particular year. But when I left in 2011 to go over to ministry, we had helped more than 10,000 women to go back to work. And also part of the effort of getting women to go back to work is also to ensure that we do have flexibility for them. So we also asked the government for funds. We started the Flexi Works Fund so that employers can tap into the fund in order for them to be able to provide flexible work options for women. So that was something that I found very enriching. What did I learn from all this? I learned one very important thing, and this I think I share with you, and that is that once you have an idea, it is not sufficient just to pontificate, to advocate, and agitate alone. You have to roll up your sleeves, get your hands dirty, and be involved in the nitty-gritty. You have to be in the trenches. And what do I mean by that? When we started the program Back to Work in 2007, we were starting from zero base. We didn't really know how to start, what to do. And you really, although I was supervising that program, you really have to be down on the ground to do it. I remember that when talking to employers, talking to companies, and I like to drink soya bean, you see. So Viswa also asked me, what do I eat for breakfast? I said, I drink soya bean. So I used to go to Mr. Bean and buy the drinks, and some of it is near my home, near my house. And so I used to see a lot of older women manning the counters. And so I realized that there's a lot of opportunities. So when I went back, I told my colleagues, can you go and talk to the Mr. Bean, the owner of Mr. Bean, and see whether they can take in some of our women to work. And they became one of our partners. But that was what we had to do all the time. You have to really consciously look out for opportunities for the women. And if you think it is a walk in the park, it is not. Because the women, some will say, look here, I only want to work 4 hours. I want to work at a place that is only 5 minutes walking distance from my home. I cannot work in the morning because my children have to go to school and so on. So really, you got to really go down. It's not a question of you advocating it and say back to work, give more opportunities, have flexible work options. You really got to work very closely with the women. You got to work with the employers and try to design jobs for them. So that's what I mean. If you have an idea, it's not enough just for you to advocate, to think about it, to agitate for change and so on. You really got to really go down and make sure that that idea takes off the ground. So that's one point I wanted to share with you. The other issue that the other thing that I wanted to share with you is my work also related to the labor movement. I represented the labor movement on the International Labour Organization, ILO, which is an agency of the United Nations, for a number of years. And one of the most fulfilling work, as you can see, as you can see, the ILO is actually a mini United Nations. All races, all people from all over the world are there. So it's a very interesting place, but it's also a place where you can actually make a difference. So this is where, we did some inspection in Nepal, for instance, where ILO funded some programs for health and safety. As you can see, this was only about 10 years ago, but the working conditions were really quite bad. And it was really sad because the workers were more concerned about machines breaking down and how that affects their livelihood, rather than being worried about how the dust, poor ventilation is affecting their health. There was even a pregnant woman who was working there. So, so it was one of the most fulfilling tasks that I performed when I was in the ILO. And I agree completely with Professor Chan Heng Chi, and she said, look here, you've really got to treat migrant workers well because it's right to do so. So not a question of whether there is a law or there is no law, but it's just right because they are human beings and you are a human being. So as a human being, you should treat another human being with dignity. And this is where I'm so delighted that one of the last pieces of work that I did before I left the labor movement was to work towards getting a convention out for the domestic workers. And this is the youngest convention of the ILO. ILO has 180 over conventions. This convention was adopted in the conference in 2011, the International Labour Conference in 2011. And we had to work for 2 years on this conference because the first year was a discussion in 2010 in a conference. And then you have to get people to rally around and support it. support a set of conclusions. And then in 2011, you come and negotiate on the actual text of the convention. But this convention is special because for 40 years, the domestic workers all over the world tried to get a convention, ILO convention, to provide international standards for them, and they were not successful. So we worked very hard. But the most important thing is, and you see, this is a very interesting convention. As I said, this is a T-shirt. This is a convention where the whole international community of NGOs and domestic workers were mobilized. The unions, the NGOs, the domestic workers mobilized, a whole community of them. So they came up with T-shirts, they have badges, they have this, they have publications, this is the report, and so on. So this was important because we had to get the international community to support this convention. And we need to get individual countries to support it, also governments. And that leads me to my next point. My next point really is this. So you see, this is some of the advocacy work that I do in order to give greater protection to our domestic workers. My next point really is this. When you embark on an action, you need to strategize, build coalitions, and get broad-based support. Keep your troops constantly energized, empowered, and have their eyes glued to the goal. And now this is important in the context of this convention because, as you know, not everybody, not all the employers like this convention. There was massive lobbying against the convention in 2010. By 2011, they accepted it. You know, they accepted it's a done deal. They better negotiate on the text in order to ensure that there's enough flexibility for them to be able to adopt it. So, but there was massive lobbying in 2010. And one of the lobbying techniques was basically to ask for voting. And every time when we have a discussion, they don't agree on a point, they ask for voting. So there'll be 100 over delegates, and they ask for individual voting. Can you imagine how time-consuming? But that was a strategy on the part of the employers. And that if we could not finish the discussion in 2010, we could not adopt a set of conclusions, the thing will just die. So the 40 years investment is also gone. So we really had to strategize. And what did we do? We had to really, make sure that there are some governments sitting on the fence, some governments pro, some government against. So you need to know the governments, where they stand. And so we work with individual groups. The Latin Americans have one view, the Europeans have another view, the Africans have their own views about the convention and what should go into the text, and then the Americans, of course, you see. So it's such a diverse, you're dealing with the whole world, and everybody have their own views. And within my own troops also, the workers' delegates, I have people from all over the world. So the Latin Americans, African workers, the American workers, the European workers, all have different views. You just have to make sure that you keep them together. So it's very important that you ensure that you build coalitions within your troops and outside, so that if the employers are against it, at least the governments are supportive. In the final issue, when we have to vote, then we will, we will ensure enough votes for us in support. So, and we have to keep them empowered because between 2010 to 2011, when we debate on the text itself, they have to go and lobby in their own countries, you see, to continue to make sure that their government support and so on. But what is the most important thing about this convention? This convention provides some international standards for domestic workers to be recognized as workers, and therefore to be given some of the basic conditions of work to ensure decency wherever they may work. And so I think that is the most important thing. It is what Professor Chan Heng-Chi say, that it is only the right thing to do, treat people decently, whether they are your own people or they are migrants, it doesn't matter. Treating people with decency cuts across all color barriers, all religious barriers, it cuts over all barriers. It's just treating people as human beings. So that's my next point. Let me come to my third point. And the third issue that I used to talk about is about the elderly. And this is part of the work that I was doing when I was in the ministry. And one of the most satisfying work as well, where we look at as you know, the number of seniors in Singapore, people aging is very rapid. So now it's 1 out of 12. By 2030, it will be 1 out of 5. So we need to make sure that we have enough infrastructure, support facilities, in order to make sure that if we want the aging within the community to take place, then there's enough facilities and support structures to support our seniors. And this is where then one of the projects we did under MSF was to make sure that, you know, there are enough senior care centers, where last time it was in silos. You have one run by Ministry of Health, doing the rehabilitation, physiotherapy work, and so on. The other one is social care services run by the Ministry of Social and Family Development. So what we did was we combined the two, and the government came up with a package of $100 million in order to ensure this. And of course, this is where we also harness technology. You see the gentleman here, he does not have to leave his home. He's single, lives alone in a rented flat. And then, you know, but you cannot have a social worker coming in every day or medical worker coming in every day to look at him. But in between, where they can't come in, he's able to access through to the computer, where there is a caregiver at the other side, a social worker, to ask him questions. Are you okay? Have you taken your medicine? And then when he talks, you know, then they know that he's all right. If he can't talk or they can't see him, then they know there's a problem. Now, this is not something where he has to type anything, nothing. At the time when the social worker wants to communicate with him, they just will activate the system, and then he will hear a sound, and then he will go to the computer and he will start, and then the whole thing. So this is something that's really, I find it extremely fulfilling. And this is also something where we started the senior group homes, where, you know, when you send somebody to the nursing home, our senior citizens to the nursing home, they completely lose control over their life. Basically, there's a schedule, they have to do this, they have to get up in the morning, do this, they lose control over their lives. But not all our seniors are in that category. Some of them are still quite mobile, and they want to have control over their lives, to make their own decisions. They want to go to the hawker center to eat, they want to talk to their friends, be within the community. And this is where we started these senior group homes, where they can, a few of our senior citizens together, they share one rental flat. They are supported by some services, whether by Moral Thai Hua Kwan or NTUC Elder Care, but they can continue to lead their life, do whatever they want to do, have full control of themselves. In my constituency also, I started about 2 months ago this center for, these are for seniors who are still active or mobile, but it's important. It's important. And I know there's a lot of young people here. I hope you will also understand, because you have parents, you have grandparents who will have to make use of these facilities, and these are really important. But this is some of the things that we do on the ground. I set up a center about 2 months ago to cater to the needs of the active aging elderly community. What is the point that I'm trying to make? The point that I'm trying to make here in the work that we do, that we advocate, the causes that we push for, it is important to know that some problems are really multifaceted, and you may not be able to achieve everything at the same time. Phase out the expected outcomes rather than try to achieve everything all at once. Sometimes it's useful to float the idea. I floated the idea of elder care leave. So it was nimbly rejected by the agencies that be, but not completely. So I still harbor that hope that one day there will be elder care leave in our legislation to provide support for our elderly. But for advocacy, this is part of the things that you also need to bear in mind, that you may not get everything at one go. One of the other things that I've been working quite closely with and the various groups is on mental illness. And this is obviously another group that does not have a voice, completely no voice. And they have no voice partly because society looks down on them, is prejudiced against them, discriminates against them, and that makes their voice even quieter, because if they speak up and then people will identify them as something wrong, they say something wrong with you, right? So they rather not speak up. And what is worse, it's not just them, it's also their caregivers. Their caregivers also cannot speak up because they are also scared that, you know, they will be identified, they will be stigmatized in the same way as their family members who are suffering from mental illness. So really, this is a group that has no voice. And they are affected in so many different ways, and therefore I think it is really important that we need to give them a voice. We've done so many things, different things. The government came out with I was talking about mental illness for a number of years already, but in 2007, I'm glad to know, government came up with a national blueprint, 2007, a national blueprint on mental illness. So it was really quite a holistic slew of measures. But as you know, it may be, you may provide funding, you may have the measures, you have a policy in place, but nothing really replaces the effort that each and every one of us put in order to reach out to these people, because there's tremendous amount of work really to be done. You may know of a neighbor, you may know of someone in the same block, you know that the person really needs help, and not the normal help like Comcare financial assistance or whatever, but really the person needs help, like having to get someone to talk to him or her and encourage them to go for treatment, you know. So this is a long haul. I won't go into the details. You are free to ask me on any of these issues, but I just wanted to say that certainly this is one group that one really needs to look at very carefully. I work with many of these groups. In my constituency, I have 3 of them. I have the Singapore Association of Mental Health. They run a shelter in my constituency. I have the Community Rehabilitation and Support Services run by the Singapore Anglican Services, Welfare Services. And I have Club Heal that is operated by a group of very dedicated, passionate volunteers and those doctors and those involved in healing of people with mental illness. And so, and this is also a creeping illness in our society, so we need to also be mindful of that. What's the point that I'm trying to make? I'm trying to say that in whatever you do, I'm sure you have your pet causes. I don't know what are your pet causes, you know. Your pet causes could be you could be interested in pet animals or so, that's okay. You know, that's also a very important pet cause that you may have, but you may look at your pet causes, but sometimes you get so intimidated by failures, by lack of response, by no progress. But you must always remember that you must not be distracted by initial setbacks, cold support, and deaf ears. Sometimes it happens like that. It takes a long time, you know, to educate people, to raise awareness, for people to finally say, yeah, this is a big problem. You know, this is the elephant in the room that we cannot ignore. We must do something about it. But that is where your role is very important. Your advocacy role, your role in bringing these issues up to the attention of everyone so that people can look into it and say, yeah, these are some of the issues that I also I want to be identified with, and I want to help. And so this is, if you believe in something, you must have patience, perseverance, and continue to maintain a presence. So I think that is really also very important in whatever causes that you are advocating. You must start with a passion, and then you must have perseverance, you must have patience, and you must constantly, you know, never be affected by setbacks. Sometimes if you have a group of people, I think that helps a great deal as well. My final point, Vishwa is looking at me already. He said, when is this person going to stop, you know, but okay. My final point is, this is always our bugbear, is time, right? So we say we've got no time. But I don't believe it's an issue of time. I believe it's an issue of choices. We have 24 hours in a day, but 24 hours is actually a lot of time. Although I'm sure there are many times we wish we got 48 hours in a day, but even with 48 hours, we say we have no time, you see. So it's not about time, it's about choices, you know, the choices that we make. We can choose in one day to spend 20 minutes less on our Facebook, you know, 20 minutes less chatting with our friends, 20 minutes less speaking on the handphone, you know, we can do that. Or 20 minutes less on the computer doing something, I don't know, looking at materials or whatever, you know. So we can do that. And that 20 minutes is a lot of time. 20 minutes times 5 or 20 minutes times 7 is a lot of time. So you can. Some of the busiest people that I know are also the most committed and passionate people, because they really are dedicated and they want to give back, and that's why time is not a problem for them. So they make that choice. It's a deliberate choice. So really, you have to ask yourself, how are you spending your choices? So it's not about time, it's about choice. How are you spending your choices? Are you spending it, the choices that you make, is it making a difference to somebody else's life, contributing to improving somebody else's welfare, the community? So that's the question that I want to leave with you, and I'm sure that many of you, you know, in your own ways, wants to contribute and have been contributing. Well, I want to say thank you for listening to me, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you very much.
You know, the amazing thing is, Halimah is someone who doesn't mince the words. I saw it firsthand when I was a nominated member of parliament. And I tell you something, she was definitely, by far, the MP who asked the most inconvenient questions in Parliament. The most number of inconvenient questions. And the general speculation at the point of being appointed Speaker was the whole idea of making a Speaker was a silencer. So, was that the reason? Are we seeing a silencing of Halimah?
No, I don't think so.
No?
Well, you know, this is an interesting thing. When I was asked to take over as Speaker, I'm not quite sure.
Did you have a choice?
I'm sure I have a choice, but you know, but it's really a very difficult choice to say no.
Because of the person who asked you.
Yes, of course. But I think the role of the Speaker, I was trying to figure out what is the role of the Speaker. You look at the Constitution, you look at the standing orders, it's very Spartan, there's not much, you see. So I figured out that being the situation, that I could also somewhat redefine a little bit the role, change it at the fringes perhaps in the beginning, then gradually, you know. So it just gave me a little bit of flexibility, I think, you know, to speak up. I may not be able to speak in Parliament, but I can speak outside Parliament, which I have been doing.
But without you asking those inconvenient questions, Parliament is not what it used to be, right?
Well, I think there are others as well.
You sure?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Are they all from the PAP or? Okay, you
Well,
don't need to answer
I don't
that
have to
question.
answer that.
It's a career-limiting answer. Okay, you know, one of the things you said earlier was, I mean, choices, right?
Yes.
You obviously made a choice in entering politics. Now, why did you make the choice? Even before you entered politics, you were committed to giving a voice to the voiceless. From the time you were an undergrad,
Right, yeah.
these things bothered you. You felt that there were too many people out there who had issues, but there wasn't anyone speaking up for them. They needed a voice. But why did you choose politics to give that voice? Is that the only route for giving people a voice?
So that you can have a loudspeaker, you see.
Yeah.
You enlarge the voice. Basically, that's the reason. That you know, in Parliament you make decisions, you can help to formulate, you know, the decision, you can take part in the policy making process and so on. So I felt that, look, you know, this is one way of, you know, furthering the causes that I was championing, and I thought it was important that maybe I could make a difference. But I want to tell you also that one of the reasons I agreed to stand for election, because I look at Parliament and I realized that from the 1950s up to 2001, when I entered politics and I agreed, there was not a single Malay woman member of Parliament. Then I realized that, look, how much it would make a difference to the Malay women. That, look, that they too can aspire to to whatever position that they want. I thought that would be really, really wonderful. I didn't know when I agreed whether I will be elected or not. That's for the people to decide. But I thought that if I do get elected, wouldn't it be great that at least, you know, for the Malay community, the Malay women especially, that they see the possibilities that they could achieve, you see. So I thought that was also one reason why I entered. Yeah.
Well, since you're talking about Malay women, please allow me to ask you this question, which is a current topic. It's sensitive, but I'd like to ask you anyway. You know, not only are you a Malay woman, you're a Malay woman wearing a tudung, wearing a scarf, you know, and in society there are sectors, there are individuals, there are groups even, who view the wearing of the scarf as a statement of fundamentalism, and for some people is radicalism. Now, has there been uncomfortable situations? Because not only are you an MP, you are a Speaker of Parliament,
Right, yeah.
wearing a scarf in a predominantly non-Malay Muslim society. Have there been moments when it was uncomfortable?
Frankly speaking, no. Because I don't think people really bother whether you've got a scarf on your head or not, but really people truly wants to know what's inside your head. And I think it's really, really, right? I mean, if it's why you put a scarf, I think, you know, well, there's something wrong.
I may even look pretty.
But I think people don't really bother. I work in the international context, you know, I remember there was after one very long, lengthy debate in the ILO, and this German gentleman came and he said that you are the only man in this room. He said, you know, I took that as a compliment, you know.
You were man enough to take it as a compliment.
I took it as a compliment. So, you know, people don't really care about the headscarf on your head, but I think people just are more interested with what's inside your head. And partly it's also a testimony to the nature of our society. I don't think people view women wearing tudung in that way, that they are being associated with whatever, you know, extreme views or extreme positions. No, I don't think so. I think we've blended pretty well. People have accepted.
So
and I
you
think
would
that's
say
really
we've
good.
come some way.
We've come some
right?
way, yes, yeah.
And another quick question. You also mentioned just now, I mean, when you started, you talked about you felt and still feel strongly about women having the ability to make choices. I think that's really what you're talking about. You know, there are choices, but sometimes women feel that they don't have the ability to make those choices because you've got family, you've got children, and there's a general assumption that if you have children, it's the mother's responsibility, not the father's. The sex role stereotypes still exist, right? You can't run away from those things.
Yeah.
Now, you've got 5 children.
Yes.
Right? 5 children, you know? And she wasn't an absent mother, from what I understand, right? Now, that's a Herculean achievement.
Right.
You know, 5 children, trade unionist, and not a sleeping trade unionist, an active one, and a member of parliament, very active, one of the most active members of parliament, right? An advocate of causes, and a very present mother. How on earth do you have 24 hours or do you have something else? No, I'm puzzled. I'm really puzzled.
Well, I think I'm quite blessed because I do have a very supportive family and a very supportive husband. That's very important. But having said that, I take up your point about, you know, the sharing responsibilities at home, and I think that's really crucial because surveys and studies that have been done shows that working women on the whole spends a lot more time doing housework, taking care of children, compared to working men. You see, the problem is this. The role of the women has changed. They started off as being caregivers, carers, but their role have changed with education, with employment opportunities. They've become not just carers, they've also become income earners. But their role as caregivers remained. It has not changed. But the role of the men as the income earners has remained as income earners. It has changed a little bit, but not that much. So the role of men as income earners has not evolved as much as it should to also take some more of the caregiving responsibility so that it's equal, you know, in terms of the caregiving and earning income, the responsibilities. For instance, a survey showed that for caregiving, a working mother actually spends about 39 hours. And it's against a working father who spends 29 hours. So in a week. So there is that disparity, and that is a fact. So I really do hope that with the younger generations, we will see that shift where, you know, there is a lot more of the caregiving responsibilities taken over by fathers as well, which is important. Yeah.
But, you know, it's interesting that in the recent round of procreation sort of schemes, one of the schemes was that a certain percentage of the maternity leave,
the fathers can
the
take
fathers have the option of taking.
You know, Vishwa, I would like to see 1 year down the road how effective that is.
You don't think so?
I hope it will be, but we need to monitor something.
No, really, seriously, you don't think so?
I am a little bit doubtful, not because I have surveyed anybody since the law came into effect, but because of the experiences of other countries, including the Scandinavian countries, where they have this much longer period, but they found that it is the mothers who take most of it rather than the father.
So are you saying it is
the societal,
it's a hopeless situation where basically the men will not take on more responsibility?
Well, I think if
Am I the only man who does that?
Oh, I'm not sure. I got to ask your wife. But I think it is shifting. It is shifting, really. But really, somehow it is still very much segmented in terms of the roles. And we are not talking about just Singapore. We're talking about globally in the advanced countries as well, in Sweden, in other Denmark, other countries as well. But it will change. It will evolve. I've come across fathers who said that, look, I don't see my children. This is terrible. They are growing up without me in their lives, and which is very bad. So I think it will shift, but I hope that it will shift faster, which is important.
Okay, one final question. This is for the benefit of the questions that will come fast and furious in a few moments. What is the reason why you developed this tremendous empathy for people without a voice? I mean, we must admit that not every one of us has this natural empathy for people who don't have a voice, right? We go about life, the way life comes to us. We don't really necessarily look around us and say, that poor guy doesn't have a voice. There may be a voice for him. What made you move in this direction?
Well, maybe I think because I grew up in very poor. My father died when I was 8, and my mother had to work in order to support us, When my father died, my mother told us, she gathered everybody, all of us around, and she said...
How many of you?
There were 5 of us. And she said that, look, the father left nothing but, in the Malay words were gusi dan gusi, what did she say? Gusi dan gigi, just the teeth and the jaws, or something like that, that's all. That's nothing. So, and when you grow up in such an environment, you find that, poverty can be very disempowering. It can be very disempowering. And you know that sometimes people, don't speak up for themselves because they feel that maybe they don't have the right to speak or they don't know what to say, So I think it's really important. Once you grow up in that environment, you realize that, people do need support. And this is where you need to provide that kind of a voice. Maybe that was the reason. I really don't know, but for some of us, maybe some of these things also because in our life, as I grow up, you see a lot of things which you feel are not right, so you need to have them corrected as well. The way people are treated, I'm not talking of just the government people relationship, I'm talking about sometimes people among themselves, within the community, they don't treat each other also with respect and dignity. So I think that's probably one of the reasons why I have that sense, perhaps. I really don't know, but when we talk about poverty in the old days, it's quite different from now.
Yeah.
Now you have ComCare, you have CFAC, you have KeyFast, you have so many schemes. Poverty in those days, nobody wants to go on social welfare. It's really called social welfare. Well, nobody wants to go on social welfare because it's so stigmatizing. It's really very stigmatizing. If you go on social welfare, that means you're really something, really very, very, very desperate situation.
And even bursaries.
Bursaries
People
also.
wouldn't want to take bursaries.
People wouldn't want. And then you have the free school book scheme, really. I used to remember every year I used to go to Bras Basar, the used bookshops, the used bookshops. You may not know, it's all gone. But in those days, they even sell used textbooks. So sometimes I will go there, I'll be the last kid to buy because no money, there's no textbook, and then I will go to class. Then one whole week, no textbook, the teacher will be scowling at me. But, I got to share textbooks. I mean, it's really, really quite completely disempowering, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah.
And you when you were in law school in NUS, did you feel that gave you a platform for advocacy?
Yes.
Understanding the law.
Yes, I think obviously if you understand the law, that gives you a chance also to help people, to interpret laws, to help people, people to make use of the laws that are there. For instance, whether it is the labor laws, industrial relations laws.
Or the laws that are not there.
Or the laws that are not there, the gaps in the laws, yeah. So I think that was one of the reasons also why I had chosen law,
Sure. Thank you. Questions? And as I say, no speeches, please. Yes. Please introduce yourself.
My name is Renee.
Renee, yes.
I'm the facilitator for the VIPs from Nigeria and Kenya, who are as empowered as Madam Halimah Yacob. Please, I would like to convey my congratulations on the amazing work that you've done to speak for their disenfranchised. There are two subjects that I would like to ask about. There is a the large number of single mothers who are not represented. And as you know, as we are faced with these incredible challenges of pressures on women, many families break up, but there are many, many things that they don't have easy access to, because they're burdened. They have the double burden of the children and being financially disempowered. So what is done for these single parents? Is there any other incentives that you could direct them to? And the other issue I would like to bring up is culturally, the women are not brought up to articulate or speak up, because the way the society is, in our culture, where they are not encouraged to speak up the way that, especially our generation. So what advice do you want to give to these people to stand up for their rights?
Well, I want to say I do empathize with the situation of single mothers. I think it's really a real struggle. My mother was a single mother, but by virtue of the fact that she lost her husband, lost my father when I was very young. So I know the struggles, and it is real, it is tough. It's really really very hard. But for single mothers that you're talking about, that who are unmarried single mothers, that's probably your point. There are two benefits that they don't get, and that is the baby bonus and the housing benefits. But they can purchase a house only if they're 35 years old and above. And other than that, all the other benefits, they have equal access, whether it is ComCare, whether it is KIFAS, whether it is CFAC. And these are the enhancement schemes for children put in childcare or put in kindergartens and so on. Will the government change that policy? I suppose the point is this. I suppose some of these policies are very much also rooted in what is the government's perception of how people respond to these issues, And so government often says that it cannot move ahead of how society thinks about such issues. So I suppose that's, but at some point, I suppose these are some of the issues that we need to look at. The baby bonus is very much tied to the procreation package. That I can imagine will be not something that one can really say, can be so easily changed. But at least for housing, perhaps, that could be something that perhaps at some point could be looked into. But the concern is always that government does not want to move ahead of what society thinks about such issues and whether it will be sending the wrong signal. So that is, the concern. But other than that, I think other schemes, assistance are available to children. The most important thing is the children from single mother's family as well.
Yeah. But I guess the concern here is you may help the child.
Yes.
But the child still goes back to an environment where you have a disgruntled mother. That does affect the child's ability to come out of that situation, and it's something that perhaps the government should think about. Yeah. We have several questions that are coming online. Val, could we put the first question? Yeah, it's up here. Why is there resistance for a minimum wage in Singapore? You've been in the labor movement?
Yeah, I've been in the labor movement. And of course, minimum wage is always a favorite topic and a hot topic. But the equivalent of the minimum wage that the labor movement is advocating now is the progressive wage, which basically says that, look, for categories of workers, whether it is those doing security work or whether they are cleaners, they are put on this wage system, and then there is also a certain career path for them as they progressively acquire the skills. So it's not just the wage alone that goes up, the skills also goes up progressively and they can advance in their career. Is this a better system than a minimum wage system? If you look at the minimum wage, look, recently in Indonesia there are massive riots Indonesia has got minimum wage. But every year, without fail, there will be massive demonstrations in order to increase wages. Because one of the challenges about minimum wage, and this is based on what I look at the research and all that one looks at based on the ILO studies and so on. One of the things about the minimum wage is that it usually is behind the median wage of the country. Because in order to set the minimum wage, usually there is a wage setting mechanism that takes some time, and sometimes the wage setting mechanism takes three parties: employers, the government, and the workers. And by the time they sit down and they agree on the minimum wage, the minimum wage usually falls behind the median wage. Yeah.
But that makes sense, because the minimum wage is not meant to help alleviate the conditions of those who are at the mean level. It's meant to alleviate the concerns or the predicament of those who are in the bottom 25, 20 percentile. Now, it is to protect them that the minimum wage is set in, not for the others.
Right, yeah.
Right? It's so that these people will not be given a wage that's below that threshold.
But that is the challenge. When you set a minimum wage in some countries, the problem is it becomes the wage. The wage. It becomes the wage.
The benchmark.
Instead of assessing people based on the value of the job, it becomes the wage, and employers are not prepared to pay beyond that. So that's why you see, whether it is Vietnam, whether sometimes it's China, whether it is Indonesia, people are not happy. They demonstrate. They want the minimum. They want better wages than what is provided in the minimum.
But I guess the quick question is this: is this a done deal? Government is not going to relook this, or is it possible that this could be reviewed at some point? The government's position.
Vishwa, I'm not the government, so I'm the speaker. But I suppose that at this point of time,
Good answer.
at this point of time, it's the progressive wage, and asking that the progressive wage be given some chance to survive, to function. But at the end of the day, what we have to tell employers is treat people with decency. That's most important. Pay people decent wages, You cannot pay people indecent wages and then expect them to do a decent day's work. It's not possible. Yeah.
Okay. I know you're not government, but there's another I'm putting up questions that have the most hits. Huh?
Okay.
So you're not government, but give an intelligent response.
Answer, yes.
Yeah? So
I hope I've been giving intelligent
no,
answers
so far yes. But there is such a thing as diminishing returns. Why is it so difficult for the government to answer the question? And the question is, how many poor people are there in Singapore?
How many poor people are there in Singapore?
I don't think they mean the exact number.
No.
But what's the ballpark?
Well, you look at the wages, you could use wages as a basis, So if the median wage is, let's say, I'm not quite sure what it is now, 2008, 2009?
About that, yeah.
Then so you look at the whole broad spectrum. So anybody that falls below a certain level, that becomes the bottom 20%. You look at the cutoff at the bottom 20% or the bottom 10%, that will be the poor people. I don't have the figures with me. Yeah. So if you use income as a cutoff, that's probably one way of determining how
Poverty.
many poor people are there. Yeah.
Is there a difference, when you were in government,
Yeah.
Was there a difference in the definition between poor and poverty-stricken in Singapore?
I don't really see that. I don't see that. I don't recall that. Yeah, poor, poverty-stricken.
Because lately there have been quite a bit of discussion about the definition of poverty, right? The poverty benchmark.
Yeah, but I think what we need to be most concerned about is whether people who need help gets the help, and that's the really most important thing. Like in my constituency, I have an elderly person, very ill, and then she lives with a daughter who's a schizophrenic, and she lives in a private estate. And then I've been to her house, I visited her a couple of times. Her house is quite dilapidated and old. If you use a line, she is certainly not poor in that sense. She's got that asset. But to suggest to her that you go and sell the asset and downgrade, I think for her, she's lived in that house all her life. So she gets financial assistance, you know. So the most important thing, as I said, is that we make sure that people who need help gets the help, you know. And the best way to do that is, you know, you have ground schemes where we can extend the help to them. And people on the ground are the best to do that. You see, and this is where we work with the VWOs, voluntary welfare organizations, the family service centers, to identify those who need help and extend the help to them, rather than say whether, you know, we should have a certain income level or not. Of course, I hope that we all agree those who are in the lowest income level should get the most help. And then for the rest, they need help, then we are in a position to assess, you know, as they come, what kind of help they need, and extend those help. Yeah. For instance, if you take childcare, the financial assistance scheme for childcare, for kindergarten, the level of support is rather high. It's not just at the bottom 20%. You look at medical subsidies, the level of support is also high, whether it's nursing home, whether it is also for medical subsidies. It is, I think, about 65% or so. So there are different schemes. To cater to different needs. Yeah.
All right. Yes, and then, oh, sorry, Anne first, and then yourself. You could go to the mic. Yes, please.
Yes. I'm Anne Wee from NUS. There's an aspect of poverty that I haven't, unfortunately, the amendment to the Act is not doing anything for. And this is the people who used to be Division 4, the cleaners. They belonged to the AUPE, and they had rights under the Employment Act. And because of the outsourcing of low-skilled labor, there are a lot of local people involved too. Then they're just casual workers with a contractor. And of course, he's got to make something because the human resource management costs have been outsourced, really, and to a contractor, and he's got to live. And therefore, the wages are always low. Yeah. And they have no rights. They have no right to medical leave, so they don't go to the polyclinic, so they get chronic, their conditions get chronic, and then we have the expensive dialysis and strokes in their 40s, and
so
you know all that. Is there something the trade union movement can do to get some rights for these people? Or at least try and stop the outsourcing and have direct employment in the way we used to in the old days?
Well, you're quite right, and outsourcing is one of the issues, and that results in workers' wages being lowered. So what the labor movement had done is to go for best sourcing, you know, to say that, look, don't go for the cheapest tender that comes in, but go for best sourcing to look at, you know, the outcomes rather than the cheapest tender that comes in. And when that happens, because when you outsource something, obviously, then you force the contractors to go and tender as low as possible so that they can get the contract, and then they go and squeeze the workers so that they can tender at the lowest price possible. With best sourcing that the labor movement started, the idea is not to ask contractors to tender at their lowest level, and also to tell employers and companies not to accept tenders that tender at the lowest, but rather look at, you know, various conditions. One of it is whether the contract provides for payment of CPF, compliance with labor laws, the Employment Act. Whether you are a cleaner or technician or whatever, everyone has to comply with the Employment Act. So that is what is being done. And also for cleaners now, the labor movement has already working with companies in order to have the progressive wage model. So they start with 1,000, for instance, with the town council workers 1,000 or 1,002. I'm not really up to speed with their latest change on this. And then progressively they increase their wages. So
but
they are put.
Was that the thrust of your question? Was that the thrust of your question? Was that the thrust of your question?
Actually, some of them are getting 600 still, because I agree with people who ought to do
Yeah.
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 But you're saying the reality is some people are stuck at that $600 benchmark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They do. They
Yes.
have to. They have to. If they are not getting it, and please give me the names, I will make a personal complaint to the Ministry of Manpower. Because that is provided under the Employment Act. It's very clear they're entitled to paid sick leave, they're entitled to paid annual leave. They're not getting, that means they're not complying with the law.
But I guess the challenge is the people who are in this category, ironically, don't also happen to know their rights.
Yes.
Even if they know their
That's a
rights,
fair
they don't
point.
know where to go.
That's a fair
Well, you
point.
see, they're paid on a daily basis, and you've got to work so long before
Yeah.
you're entitled to anything. So the contractor very cleverly doesn't employ them that long. There's
Yeah.
a break, and then starts over again. So
That's a
I
fair
mean, I'm
point,
sorry,
yeah.
but there are ways of getting around this.
Yeah. So
Okay.
one of the things that I think the ministry is looking at is how to address this issue. That is what you say about truncating of contracts is a fair point, because under the Employment Act, in order to be able to enjoy annual leave, you must have worked for 3 months. To enjoy sick leave is the same thing. So if they keep truncating the contract, you will never be able to acquire the length of service to be able to be entitled to the benefits. But I'm glad that at the last Parliament session, one of the things about being a speaker, I have to keep awake, you see. So I could listen to everything that Tan Chuan Jin said. So he said that this is one area they're looking at.
Were you saying that
know.
you need to keep awake when Tan Chuan Jin speaks? No.
I have to keep awake all
Sorry.
the time. So, I mean, this is one
Chuan
of
Jin
the
is not
areas
very
that is
likely
being
for that
looked at.
again.
I hope that this will be the next wave of changes to the Employment Act.
Yeah.
Where you address this attempt to circumvent the law. I understand your point, and I certainly feel that we must address some of these loopholes in the law.
So, Anne, you have to give the context, the details. To
Yes, please do.
Be an
Please do.
advocate.
Yeah.
Don't give up. Be a man. Okay. Sorry, yes.
Okay, now. My name is Tan Siping, graduate of the University of Malaya, 1955. I have 2 questions. I think from your presentation, it seemed to me that you go around fishing for those supposed group who are supposed to be marginalized, who cannot speak. Therefore, you want to be the advocate, you want to do all that. I don't know whether that amounts to some persecution mania. Whether you, in your process of growing up because of your poverty, or because you come from a minority race, then you see, Poppy, we are also marginalized, that you want to fight for their right. See, so I don't know whether that my interpretation is true or not.
Well,
You can comment.
Yeah. Shall I answer that first?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think the work that I do cuts across all races. The work that we do in the trade union movement, we are blind to your race, religion, gender, or whatever. So that's what we, yeah. It has got nothing to do with who you are or what you are.
But
if you
then
need help,
in your growing up process, because you are poor and you feel other people also similarly poor, I must help them.
yes,
that's
of
sort
course. That
attitude.
I suppose that could be one of the influencing
Yeah.
factor. Yeah.
Okay, now my second
So, are
question.
you saying that those who didn't grow up poor,
Yeah, they will know
can't do it?
I don't care, I never suffer, so why should I care, right?
that means
I
that
must-
three quarters of you here
I
have
must
absolutely no empathy.
I must
for
correct
poor.
that
You're
perception.
so rich.
Yeah, because
No,
they never
I-
suffer, so they don't feel it. So, okay. Then my second question is that your advocacy about those people, particularly the mentally ill people,
Yeah.
I was thinking whether it is very intrusive or not. That means we best to leave them alone, because they won't know whether you are helping them or not, because mentally they cannot register whether so and so help me or this society help me and all that. So I was thinking whether best leave them alone, because then you become intrusive. You intrude into their life, into their all that, because you get people to come to the house, inquire about them, but best, they also won't remember. So I was thinking whether best leave them alone. So what do you think?
You see, that is precisely
Particularly
the
for
problem.
the mentally ill one.
Yeah, but that's precisely the problem I'm saying. The stigma that mental illness creates is so huge that people think no matter what you do, you can't help them, just leave them alone. Whether they live or they die, you don't care. But That's the problem with the stigma. But actually, if you leave them alone, they become worse. But they can be helped. They can be helped to be contributing members of society, to be able to take care of themselves and their family. But you are right. Generally, people have, the stigma is so great that people say, yeah, why bother?
Even
Nothing's
today,
going to help.
even these days.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a stigma we must fight. Please, really,
Yes.
we have to fight. That's a very important thing.
true.
One of the biggest problems is the stigma. Yeah.
Yes, please.
Good evening, I'm Yolanda. While I know that you're no government, but are there any plans for the government to actually maybe consider coming up with a comprehensive support framework for some of the marginalized groups of people? Because I work at Legal Aid, and we actually see many low-income applicants who actually come in to actually apply for like divorces, and they actually find themselves being caught in the gap by housing policies. For example, they can't get interim housing if, let's say, they do not have their interim judgment and their final judgment.
Yeah.
But they are low income, so what are they going to do, in the meanwhile, while they are waiting for the divorce to be finalized? And we all know
You're talking about the
divorce-
housing, is it?
not just
As an
housing.
example.
Yeah,
Yeah.
housing
As
is
an
an
example,
example,
yeah.
but there are other things such as childcare. They find themselves unable to actually find ways to actually obtain this while their divorces are actually being finalized. So will there be like any form of comprehensive support framework for like the marginalized groups of people in Singapore when they're actually seeking legal recourse?
You see, it's not just a question of when they're seeking legal recourse, but also in normal situations when they need help. One of the challenges is that there's so many schemes that sometimes people don't know about them. Childcare, for instance, those who come from very low income families, I tell you, 1 month you only need to pay $10. I have cases in my constituency, they are in childcare, they only pay $10 a month. If you really can't pay that $10 a month, you don't have to pay that as well. You can put your child there without having to pay anything. So if you want to put your child in kindergarten, it's the same thing. It's very low. If you really can't afford that, there are schemes to help you. But the problem you mentioned is, as I said, it's not just because at the time when they're undergoing a divorce or they have problems, but in normal situations also, there are numerous schemes available. But it's a question of whether people know and people are making use of those schemes. So the outreach part is very important. And over the years, like in this year, the announcement of the social service centers by the Ministry of Social and Family Development is very important. It's meant to intensify, strengthen the delivery of social services.
But you see, you mentioned numerous schemes. Maybe
Yeah.
therein lies the problem.
Right.
There are numerous schemes, and when you have numerous schemes, people find it very hard to scan and pin down one that is relevant to you. That might be the problem. And even for many of us who are reasonably well informed, we find it very hard to find a scheme that fits our needs. There's quite a bit of navigation to do. So really, when you talk about comprehensive, you're also talking about
Gaining
simplification,
awareness, yes.
so that it reaches out to the people who are the intended parties. In fact, a friend of mine told me recently, I don't mean this to be impertinent, but maybe I do. It was said that perhaps the government doesn't want that many people to seek aid. So you checkmate them by making it so complicated. No, of course that could be a mischievous statement,
Yeah.
but really I think there is something here that we need to do. You can have a large laundry list, right, of things. The government scores points by saying we've got all these schemes, but you've got to ask yourself, why is it that it's so difficult for people to actually say, this is what I want? Why do we need such a huge battalion of grassroots leaders to help people navigate?
But
It's something we need to ask
okay,
ourselves.
it is really, this is again a misconception or misperception about how aid is delivered, assistance is delivered. You don't have to know about the 100 schemes or the myriad schemes that are available. You just need to know where to go. You just need to know that you need to go to the CDC, for instance, or the social service centers, social service officers that are now available. You just need to go, and you just need then to relate your problems. And then the officer addressing your, talking to you, will then put you on the schemes. You don't need to know about all the schemes. You don't need to know about CFAC, KIFAS, ComCare, and all. You don't need to know anything at all. You just say,
but
look.
the problem is, I agree with you. I
Yeah.
agree with you. But
Yeah.
the problem is, at least this is my experience working with SINDA. In
Right.
SINDA, you
Yeah.
know, working with a lot of the people who need the help. SINDA is the Singapore Indian Development Association, for those who may not know. The people who really need the help don't come forward. You know why? They feel uncomfortable. They feel it's a loss of face to actually go to a CDC and talk to a person. They rather do it privately and self-help. So we are talking about a culture where people are actually, you mentioned it earlier, right? When you're growing up, even though there are bursaries and so on, even though you know that you should qualify for it, you should seek it, you don't seek it because you would be labeled as being poor. So this is the paradox of life. So while the idea is good, I think the government is a great idea by deploying so many family service centers out there, but there are people out there, hopefully it's a small number, who for whatever reasons are uncomfortable going and speaking to another individual, you know, to say, I have a problem, I can't pay my bills. You know, a face-to-face admission of that is a difficult thing for many of us. I mean,
Well, I just give you my example of how I do outreach.
yeah.
Of course, you have the usual meet the people session, people come to you. But I also know we have cases like that where they don't
Yeah.
come for whatever reasons.
Yeah.
So I do house visits 2 times a week, every Tuesday and every Thursday. And you go to the home, they open the door, you talk to them, and they do. And they do surface their problems. Like on last Tuesday I went, and there is this family, the husband suffered from a stroke. And so he can't work, and the wife had to leave her job in order to take care of him. So she had never come to my Meet the People session. So I went to her house, she invited me in, and then I asked her, how is she faring? And then she said, I do have a problem. And she said, I need help. So that's where then,
Yeah.
you know, we go to them. They don't have to come to our Meet the People session, take a number and so on. So we come face to face, one to one, and then we relate to you. I say, okay, not a problem. I will connect you to the, to the schemes that we have to help you. We will help you. So this is where you need to do extensive groundwork. You have to do, because it's not a question of you sitting down somewhere and then people will come. You're quite right. People don't.
Yeah.
But if you do have that kind of extensive outreach, you will reach people. Yeah. I went to a funeral last Monday, a wake of one of my residents, and he said that his father is on Medifund. He was very grateful. His mother also on Medifund, you see. I asked him, yes, his father died of cancer, so I asked him how are you managing the cost and all that. Then he said, well, actually the father was on Medifund. It was manageable to him, you see.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I guess I just have one more. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, you have what?
One more question.
Okay, in the interest of time,
Sure.
she's still going to be around
Oh, okay, cool.
outside
Sure.
after this.
Yeah.
So what I suggest is you stand at the door. As she's going out, you just grab her.
Okay, sure.
Okay?
Okay, I won't be
All right?
charged if
Thank you.
anything.
Before you ask the question, there is a lot of people asking this question, so I want to, can we put it up? Oh, this is the one. Hello. Do you think that you could do even more as an activist or minister rather than being the Speaker of Parliament?
Well, you know, I take life in its entirety. At different stages, cycle of our life, we do different things, right? So I started off as a trade unionist, you know. Then I became a member of parliament. I was a backbencher for 10 years. I enjoyed that role tremendously. And then I joined as a Minister of State in a ministry which I really love because I like the work. I really like the work. So these are different stages. And then you come to a stage where you have to perform this task. Look, somebody has to perform the task at the end of the day, right?
That sounds very sad, no?
Yeah. You know, I did say publicly that I love the job that I was doing in Ministry of Social and Family Development because we were doing all these various things, but you know, somebody has to do a job. It is a duty that one has to perform. One has to perform it. But it does not mean that I cannot do all the other work that I've been doing. I think I continue to do that.
But can you be an advocate? Can you practice advocacy in this current role?
Somewhat
allowed to?
limited, somewhat limited, but still can, you know. Yeah.
Can you give an example?
Example, well, you know, one of the things that I talked to the Prime Minister at that time when he asked me to be speaker, I told him that you also must allow me to continue to be engaged on the ground, and he agreed. I'm advisor to NCSS, National Council of Social Service.
Which is not normal for speakers, right?
Not
Previous
normal,
speakers,
yes, not normal. So I became the advisor to National Council of Social Services. They appointed me, the council. And in that capacity, I can attend, I can officiate their functions and speak and so on. And then also, I go back to the labor movement. I conduct classes on labor laws. That's another form of advocacy that I continue. So it can be done, not that it can't.
But not as active as before.
Different role. It's a different role. But don't forget, Viswa, one has to understand the parliament is a very important institution in our society. It's an institution that upholds democracy. And so one has to look at that context as well, you know, the kind of
It's a different
job.
level.
It's a different level, yeah.
Because you're dealing with things like legislation, which is different from advocacy.
That's right, yeah.
Sorry, what? Water. For me, I'm okay. She speaks more. This is a chance for her to speak. Okay, she speaketh. All right, you shall have the last question.
Hi, good evening. My name is Iwi, NUS Bioengineering Year 4.
NUS where?
Bioengineering
Bioengineering,
Year
okay.
4. My question is about the ethno-economic gap between Malays and the rest of Singapore. So historically, all the way till now, Malays have usually been lagging behind in terms of academic grade and subsequently at adult level, their incomes. So if the government comes in to help the Malays too much, it may lead to a crunch mentality among the Malays. That crunch mentality, basically.
Crunch,
yes.
Crunch mentality, yeah.
May not be comfortable with getting too much help. But on the other hand, if the government does not help the Malays enough, then other races are only going to go further. For instance, the Chinese, at student level, there's SAP schools, very good resources being placed for the Chinese. So, and as they grow up, because they already have a lot of academic resources, they will only go, they have a higher chance of going further when they go to work. So how, I mean, despite all the help from Mendaki, how can the government help the Malays more? And how is the government engaging other bodies like the Association of Muslim Professionals? Thank you.
You know, for all the self-help groups, it's not just Mendaki, it's Mendaki, SINDA, CDAC, and also the Eurasian Association government gives funding to them for them to be able to then assist people who need the help. And it's the same with Mendaki as well. If you look at the progress that we have made, although we are not completely satisfied, we want to be on par with the others, but we have made progress. It's not that we have not made progress. Look from 10 years ago, 15 years ago, there is progress. You look at young Malays who have done very well, you know, shows an indication, that's an indication of progress. But of course, if you compare with the other communities, then of course, you know, you will see that there is still a gap. But I am optimistic because I think with the opportunities given, there is that possibility that, and with the desire of the Malay community, I don't think there is any wish to have a crush mentality, to be reliant on the government, no. So our community wants also to be resilient, to be independent, and want to make sure that we can run as well as the other communities. And they are doing well on that score as well. So, but so I think, you know, so, and I'm, if you look at the performance, whether it is academic, employment, there have been improvements overall. So, but we, as I said, we want to be even faster, but that really takes also a lot of effort on our community with the support of the government. I think that's also very important. Yeah.
Okay, I know I did say this last question, but there was this very interesting question, which I think is it's a good way to round off this discussion. Can we show it? Now, I thought I clicked it. Sorry. Uh-oh. The one, okay. Got it? Yeah. Oops. As a politician with such rich ground experience in community service, what's your vision for Singapore come 2030? I guess the word is not so much vision, but what is that one thing you'd like to see Singapore become in 2030? Is it about money? Is it about, is it about GDP growth? I mean, what would you like Singapore to be defined by in the year 2030? Which means the younger generation. The way we would, today there seems to be a stronger emphasis on economic growth that defines us, In 2030, what would you like Singapore to be defined by?
Well, I really hope to see in 2030 that we're truly a compassionate and inclusive society, where everybody has a place, where everybody feels a strong attachment to Singapore. So really, I hope that would be where we will reach ultimately in 2030. Yeah.
Thank you. And I am very sure that you mean that. There are many people in politics who may say it because it sounds fashionable, but who may not necessarily mean it. But I can vouch for Halimah with whatever authority I have to vouch for someone. If there's one word that I would use to describe Halimah, the word is authentic. I've always admired that quality about you. You've never had to put on accents. You've never had to be, pugnacious in the way you speak. You asserted quietly, but with a lot of conviction. And I think that accounts for why you're probably an MP who is taken very seriously. And in answer to the question earlier about advocacy, in my view, you don't need to be a table-thumping person to be an advocate. In certain societies, quiet confidence and equanimity can be tremendously disarming. And I would say that is the quality that you have. And I'm sure you join me in saying that we are very proud to have you as a member of our alma mater. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lisa.
So we thought that the most befitting gift for you is a picture with me.
Oh, that's why you had to take it.
We took the picture just now, Please put
That's
this up
nice.
in your speaker's wall.
Okay.
Okay, I'll come and check whether you do it.
Oh, you access my Facebook, I can see.
Yeah, all the Facebook and everything. But Halimah, thank you so much.
Okay.
This is for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
And it's customary for us
Okay.
to have the guest say some really nice words about me.
Oh.
Tell us what you think about this experience. Positive things.
Positive, huh? Cannot say I was savage by Visva, no, huh?
No. That's giving Victor Savage too much of airtime. Well, while Halimah is doing that, just want to let you know that this is the last You Alive for this year. This is the third year we are doing You Alive. And next year, we're going to start You Alive in January, as always. And our first speaker is Minister for Defense, Mdm Halimah. So if you want to find out about hardcore defense issues, whether women are going to be conscripted, or whether women are going to be scripted, I don't know which is better. Please do come, okay? It's in January. What's the date? 17th, January 17th. You've got so many good things to say.
Yeah, I have a lot. Do I sign here? This
Yes.
one? Okay.
You can put thumbprint as well.
Okay.
Could you read it for us, please?
Okay, Sid, I really enjoyed this session. It was most enriching and energizing. I liked all your questions, but what is most important is that you will really make the choice to act as the advocate and speak up and act for those who need your help. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you both so much.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Madam Halimah, you savaged him. He didn't savage you, you savaged him. Well, this is as Viswa said, this is the last for 2013, the wonderful You Alive. And I thought that, it's only appropriate that, I've been here just for this 1 year. I actually took office in February. But You Alive has been now going on for 3 years. And Viswa has been the anchor for all the 3 years. He's come faithfully every month and, lent his expertise, his wisdom, his knowledge, his wit, and his humor, everything, including his looks. He always likes to say he's good looking. And I thought it was just appropriate, at least at this end of the show, to say that we at OER, the Alumni Relations Office here, really appreciate his dedication and his tremendous sense of interest in this particular series and bringing all his wonderful speakers that he brings and, quizzing them on all sorts of issues. He's well known for his pasang kaki questions, which he's done to do. So on behalf of OER, Viswa, we'd like to thank you very much, and we have a small token of appreciation for you.
This sounds like a farewell gift. Thank you.
It's not a farewell gift, it's just for this year.
Thank you.
Yeah, we want.
Sadly,
Don't drop it.
It doesn't feel like money.
It doesn't feel like money. But don't drop it.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I'd like to thank all of you. Thank you very much, Rizwa, for
Victor.
everything.
And
Well,
I'd like to register my thanks to the wonderful crew and the team. And I have enjoyed every session. Big reason, the speakers who just love, there's a sadistic streak, there's a masochistic streak in them, and a sadistic streak in me. But more importantly, I think we have made a difference in sending a key message to our young people. Our students, especially, that there's more to life than chasing after grades. And this is a great opportunity. This university, any university, is a great opportunity for us to do something meaningful. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you. Shall we, please?